It's been a pretty busy time lately with the two sessions, some live-streamed interviews, a few article writing deadlines, so it's taken me a few days to get to this important video. But it is something I've been meaning to do for a while, and that is to tell you about my sources. Wherever you are, welcome to another edition, and thank you for persisting with me while I make videos and write articles for others. While it's been my intention to write a script and make a video about this, I also received this highly valid question from a follower. Basically, the question was, why doesn't China try to explain themselves? Are they actually lacking a propaganda machine for the outside world? What a great question. And the answer is, surprisingly, they do, but they aren't very good at it. The US budgets from two different acts $750 million a year to say negative things about China. But as far as I know, China doesn't do that. It isn't interested in saying negative things about the USA. In fact, it seems the opposite. Every time you read a Chinese politician, a Chinese op-ed, or a Chinese media outlet talking about this, they talk about cooperation, while the US talks about confrontation and very little else. Take a look, see if you can prove me wrong. China isn't the mystery that we think it is. We can find all the information we want and need, but our Western media won't show it to us. They'll often accuse people like me of being paid propaganda because I have access to this information, which is government information. But if it was true, I wouldn't be critical of the Chinese government, which I sometimes am, nor would I ever mention things like Tiananmen Square, which I not only do, but I placed a video about that on my channel during the two sessions, and that is about as taboo as it's possible to get in China's media world. But then they'd say, see, he only did that to prove he isn't Chinese propaganda, and so I'll never win on that score. As I mentioned in a video a few days ago, I tend to say to people, if you want to attack me, that's fine, but don't expect to get any credibility for your own argument unless you can discredit me. If you prove I'm a liar with sources, then you win and I'm discredited. And if you can't, well, it isn't me who loses that argument when you just call me names. We're all very busy nowadays with information overload. We've got X, Twitter, we've got YouTube, Facebook, and many others. If we're interested in a topic, these sites recommend more of the same to us. It's how they work. They want us to stay on their platforms so they can sell more of our data and make more money from us. And this isn't me being conspiratorial. This is a known fact. Think about why and how all the social media sites are free. They're making money from us, and we don't need to pay them to do that. So the information we receive is very much what's targeted and aimed directly at us based on what we read or watched earlier. What this means to us is that we don't see what we want. Western media says that China is being vague, and we take it as a fact. China didn't tell us about something because we've never seen it in any media, but it is there. And for those of us who read English news, the only media we generally see is Western mainstream media, and they're not telling us. In fact, if you read anything the Office of State Information puts out, you'll find they're completely transparent. But we're often too busy catching up on the news we're presented with to look for the sources we need to verify it. Let me give you a recent example. So many people have asked me about this property market collapse. They're assuming, or I'm assuming because they read about it in Western media, it was some kind of a shock to China. So I've put a link to a China Daily report in 2019 where, based on information from a Politburo Central Committee meeting in April 2019, they told us exactly what was going to happen to the property market and how they planned to stabilize it. They knew what was coming, they knew what they were doing, and they knew it would impact short term, particularly on property developers who had huge debt ratios. That's why they gave those developers until January 2020 to restructure and change their method of operations. 2 of them didn't, most of them did. That's the extent of the collapse. And let's be honest, in a country of 1.4 billion people, I don't know, that's 3 times the population of Europe, 4 times the population of the USA, 2 property developers collapsing isn't a crisis. And if the truth be known, and we widen our sources, there's an even bigger danger of a property market collapse in the USA, and that's according to Atlantic Magazine, which of course I've also linked. Another example is in 2013. Xi Jinping announced that China needed a better and fairer education system. This is on page 211 of his book, The Governance of China, which was released in 2014. It really wasn't a surprise at all to anyone paying attention that a few years later he did exactly what he said he was going to do. Why would we be surprised? That's not lack of transparency. The key is to pay attention. Everything China says it will do is what China always does. Now, it isn't that I don't have gripes about China, but if you want to know the things wrong about this country, there are thousands of sites that you can go to. I won't do that. My purpose is to be truthful, not to be overly critical and make money as many of the others are. It's extremely easy to find things to criticize China about, but the bottom line is this. While I, as a foreigner, might have problems with a certain policy or a rule, I'm not Chinese, so it's not my place to criticize. That's up to the Chinese people. Now, if they don't have a problem with it, why should I criticize China for it? So there's my first major source of information, Xi Jinping. He's produced 4 books that I know of. I have them all, I've read them, and I've paid attention to what he said was important for China. And I've watched, over the 12 years he's been in leadership, as they almost all came about. Now try taking a look at Global Times or China Daily. They're both online and in English. Xinhua also has an English site, not as well developed, I think. But where I go for much of my information is the China State Council. They have something called the State Council Information Office, which is a very useful website, published in English too, as does the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. All of these will give you honest, truthful, and reliable information on and about China. So when people in media tell you China's being vague, untruthful, or China's lying to you, why not do yourself a favor and look at one of these sites? But there'll still be doubters, and there'll still be people telling us that we can't trust those sources. And here's my advice to those people. Go take a look at the archives. See what they said 5, 10, or even 15 years ago. Take a look at what China is doing right now. When China says it wants peaceful cooperation with as many countries as possible, look at how many countries China's invaded. When China says it doesn't interfere in other nations' sovereign affairs, take a look at how many countries China has tried to impose communism on. When China says it wants to help developing nations, instead of reading about debt traps in Western media, actually take a look at what African, Asian, and Central American corporations are ongoing with China. Also, do yourself one more favor and take a look at the media in the countries where China is active. You'll find positivity. China invests billions in helping underdeveloped nations. It always has. The NED, on the other hand, invests billions in bringing democracy to those nations. China's been an active supporter of development throughout the Third World since 1949. And this is why 150 or more countries have signed up to the BRI. It isn't because they've been forced to. Only 2 countries have torn up their BRI memorandums. One is Australia, where the Prime Minister who did it is now employed by US think tanks and the security industry. The other is Italy. Despite experiencing a 22% increase in exports to China, they also experienced a 46% increase in imports, somewhat larger than expected, given that they are a member of the EU, the G7, and the G20. China has laws, very good laws, which protect individuals, corporations, and intellectual property. The criminal code I've also linked, and I've sent it to many people. They tell me that using a VPN is illegal. Please feel free to read it and check it. There's no law saying a VPN is illegal. If you can find it, please send it to me and I'll stop saying it isn't. But so far, no one has ever been able to give me the law that says a VPN is illegal. Just a few days ago, someone said on X that any Chinese corporation which cooperates with the US legislators in the USA would be guilty of a crime in China. My reply was that it's an interesting claim. Can you please link us to the act and section of the criminal code which applies? Obviously, I'm still waiting for a reply to that because there is no such act or section. There's a constitution of China too, where many of the things that we in the West take for granted are also written into the protections provided to Chinese people. Why are the West getting this so wrong? Because they're not looking. And to be honest, the reason I use these and many other reliable, sometimes Western sources, is because they support what I know from my observations. Here's a reliable source, Forbes. Can you remember reading about a Chinese banking collapse last year? No, neither can I. Yet Forbes reports there has been an average of 25 a year since 2000. That's 568 banks have collapsed, not in China, in the USA. And yet they say China has a problem and is collapsing. And despite banking experts like Kyle Bass predicting the finance system is in freefall, China's banking system is solid enough not to have had a collapse, even now, several months after he predicted it would. The people who don't like China will tell you it's dangerous and you shouldn't visit. People like me will tell you it's not. We read about every single day tourists getting robbed, raped, beaten up all around the world. Ask yourself this. With all the negative reports you've seen about China, when was the last time you saw a report of a tourist in China being robbed, raped, beaten, or even murdered? And if your answer is the same as mine, it was a long time ago. To be honest, I can't remember when. So this is why I say, come and visit. I'll help you as I've helped others. I won't tell you that you can't go somewhere because it's off limits. I'll tell you, you can go anywhere you want, and I'll help you to find a way to get there. Xinjiang is hard to get to. It's remote. It's a 5-hour flight or a 24-hour train ride from Beijing, but it's easy if you have the time. So when Western media says it's difficult to get there, that's all they mean. Tibet's the same. It's a few hours on a plane or a train, but you or I can go there. Many tourists come to China via Hong Kong, and I recommend that. Either come in through Hong Kong or leave through Hong Kong, or both. And believe me, you will love the food, the hospitality, the friendliness, the safety and security that is there. You'll wonder if you're in the wrong place because you've been lied to. Once you know this, you'll realize everything you learned from your media must be subject to deeper analysis. You must check their sources and you must verify with your own. Alternatively, if you're like me, you can just take a look at Western media sources and say, well, if it's in the papers, it must be wrong. Thanks once again for watching my take on China, and I'll see you next time. Please don't forget to check the subscribe button. I lose followers every single day, many of them. And please feel free to like, share, and thank you. Bye for now.